Dear participants, welcome back. Our next speaker is Mr. Matt Perkins, Chief Advisor, Procurement, New Zealand Government Procurement, Building, Resources and Markets, Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. Mr. Perkins's experience ranges from buying a pair of gumboots for a cabinet minister one Saturday morning to leading the centralized sourcing and management of New Zealand dollars 3 billion worth of government spend on common goods and services. Mr. Perkins started his career at Pharmac, New Zealand's pharmaceutical funding agency, before working at the Ministry for Primary Industries for 10 years. There, he led the procurement function from being aligned to business units to take a category based approach. He then managed 9 community investment funding programs before leading a regulatory change program for commercial fish reporting. He has been with New Zealand government for almost 5 years, where after leading the New Zealand government centralized sourcing and supplier relationship management teams, he was recently appointed as the chief advisor. Today, Mr. Perkins will share his insights on pursuing procurement excellence. Please put your questions in the chat box and we'll take it at the end of the session. Over to you, Mr. Perkins.
Tēnā koutou katoa, e mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua, ko Rimataka te moana e runei taku nākau, ko kairangi te awa I mahia nei aku maharahara, no whanganui a tāra ahau, ko Matt Perkins toko ingoa, no reira tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening from Wellington, New Zealand to all conference attendees. My name is Matt Perkins, and over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to take you through the New Zealand procurement evolution from a world pre-financial global financial crisis and pre-COVID to where we are today, plus also give you insights into where we are going. I think the title of this presentation is really key, Pursuing Procurement Excellence, and to me it has two distinct parts. First of all, the word excellence, which is where we're aiming for, our North Star, our vision that continually guides us, but also the word pursuing. We've made great strides, but this remains a journey, as you will hear about shortly, and we've still got more we can do. Before I move into the core presentation, I just wanted to briefly explain my introduction in Te Reo Māori, the language of our Indigenous people in New Zealand. What I shared with you is my pepeha, or introduction, which is aimed to create understanding and bonds between people who don't know each other. It pays respects to the people of the land of Aotearoa, New Zealand, outlines where I'm from, and brings greetings to you all. So wherever you are today, I bring you warm greetings from New Zealand. If over the next half hour or so you learn nothing else, the key message I want to leave you with is summed up by a Māori proverb, he waka eke noa, or translated, we're all in this together. In New Zealand government procurement, we represent a number of different agencies, and we also deal with a number of different suppliers. And to make sure we're all on the same track and all heading in the same direction is key. And that'll be a continual theme of my talk this evening. For a little bit on the New Zealand context, we have a decentralized procurement model where government agencies are responsible for their own spend. There's about $52 billion of government spend that is spent on a range of goods, services, buildings, infrastructure, etc. And that's just under 21% of our gross domestic product. For those of you that aren't familiar with New Zealand dollars, that's roughly 28.7 billion euro or 31 billion US dollars. We're a country of 5 million people, and we're also situated down the bottom of the earth, and that presents some challenges, particularly with international supply chains at times. We also have generally high levels of confidence and trust in businesses and also between government agencies. And while that's not critical, It's made some of what we have been able to achieve easier. And for instance, we rely on reporting from suppliers in terms of how much has been spent under each contract. If we didn't have high levels of confidence and trust in the business to report accurately, we would need to find another way of doing this. So we do take advantage of those high levels of trust and confidence that suppliers will be honest with us. I want to take you back to about 2010, pre-global or just post-global financial crisis. Um, we had a willing minister of economic development who saw the opportunity of what procurement could do for New Zealand. Um, we established a program with the New Zealand government procurement that worked across government and made sure that we had some quick wins. Um, some of these quick wins were through our first four all of government contracts. So these are where all New Zealand government agencies purchase goods and services under the same contracts. The idea being we can make more of our collective purchasing power, and for suppliers, they're dealing with one contract rather than multiple different contracts, multiple different terms and conditions. And through those first four all of government contracts, we saved approximately 150 million New Zealand dollars over the life of the contract. By doing this, it also gave us access to funding, which allowed us to do more in the procurement space than just central purchasing. Through an administrative fee that we charged on each purchase, it gave us funding that allowed us to invest in training and development on systems and tools that benefited not just New Zealand government procurement, but also government agencies and suppliers. We've done a number of different training courses, both through recognised international training organisations such as SIPS, but also we have our own graduate program where we've had over 70 people out of university come and join the procurement community, get trained up in what they need to know, and then go and work in other government departments, taking their knowledge with them. Um, so it's more than just about the procurement in the all of government contracts that has allowed us to be successful and allowed us to create change. It's through those it has allowed us to support the government agencies and New Zealand suppliers with other tools. So now we're going through our second revolution or change, and we can loosely call it Procurement 2.0. As I'm sure many of you know, procurement has seen greater expectation to respond to things like climate change and environmental degradation. Um, Purchasing through government spend can reduce social inequalities and can have an impact on demographic changes and also support technology disruption to achieve more. So we've learned that the money we invest in goods and services can purchase more than those goods and services. It can create secondary benefits. We also have high expectations with our ministers continually looking for transparency and accountability, and a system that is looking for change, a system that wants to move on and not be stuck in the 2010s, where there's a true opportunity to focus on public value that ultimately meets our public's expectations. So this is a brief overview of our current change program, which is a high priority across government. Uh, we've laid the foundations, but also know that we're not where we need to be, and we acknowledge that that's okay. But there are three key strings to our work program. First of all, data and transparency. We currently have limited transparency of procurement activities and incompatible systems and technology that don't always talk to each other. We want to make sure we have high quality data and insights, but also an integrated e-procurement ecosystem. We also want to make sure that we're working together as one. Across government agencies, we can sometimes still be a little bit disconnected or work in our own silos, and we want strong central oversight of our procurement system, and the government to be seen truly as one customer. And then we want to unlock value. So we want to have move from compliance orientated practices and poor capability to a really professional end-to-end experience with for governments, agencies, and suppliers, where capability and capacity is the forefront. If these three things align, data and transparency, unlocking value, and working together as one, we see that's where the true value proposition is. That's where our North Star that we were working towards will be delivered. A critical theme of our transformation program is about leadership. And I just want to briefly talk a little bit about that. This isn't just at a system level or an individual practitioner level. Um, and when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking about the classic directing or telling leadership. I'm referring to what you might describe as a gardener type leadership, where it's about creating the right environment for procurement to flourish, for people to be able to deliver what they need to. Um, and it doesn't mean that as the leader, you're necessarily the expert in what we're doing. We also need to make sure that we're collaborative. Uh, Rather than thinking we know best, a lot of our work program um, in future state has been designed not just by other government agencies, but by talking with suppliers as well. They know their markets best, they know their business best, and they know some of the key frustrations of dealing with government. So, how can we learn from what their views are and reduce some of the frustration of working with government so that we are truly seen as working together and a customer of choice? Sometimes leadership's about taking a chance on something new, even if you don't know how it's going to turn out. And as procurement system lead across government, we recently undertook a lean agile procurement process rather than the traditional um, paper-based RFP process for our e-procurement tool. Now, I want to be really clear that we're not the specialists in this, or nor is lean agile procurement our own idea. If you haven't heard about it, it is worth an internet search if you want to learn a little more. But I will briefly explain what it involves. But before we went down the lean agile path, we needed to confirm that this market was appropriate for an e-procurement system. So we had a team shadow a local council which was using a lean agile process at a local level. The project team took lessons from the council experience and then really focused on what worked well, and the team identified how best the lean agile procurement process would work for our e-procurement system. We also made sure that the team received training and support from an independent coach. For the new process to be successful, it was essential to us that suppliers also understood how the process was going to work. Otherwise, only half of the equation was going to be on the same page. So we provided guidance and an access to a lap coach at our expense to the shortlisted suppliers, as well as running briefing sessions prior to the lap event itself. We were clear that any discussions with the coach remained confidential between the coach and themselves, and the coach was also on hand during the lap event for real-time questions. So following a shortlisting process, uh, rather than going to an RFP process, the project team got 4 shortlisted suppliers into a room, and their mission was to pick one supplier to partner with. By being together, the project team was able to explore how we would work best with potential partners, focusing on collaboration, transparency, and interaction, not words on a bit of paper. It also meant suppliers got real time feedback, could ask questions to clarify understanding, and got a feel for how we would work as a buyer. Of course, some sessions were held in private. It'd be a step too far to get suppliers to disclose their pricing in front of their competitors, but at the end of the lap process, the preferred supplier was selected and announced to the room. As I say, this lean agile procurement process isn't our idea, um, but we had to make sure it still ensured transparency and fairness to all. What the big appeal was to us and suppliers is that it truncated the time between shortlisting and selecting a preferred supplier, meaning less work from suppliers when there is no guarantee of actually getting paid work at the end of it. Even unsuccessful suppliers found the process really good. They liked the ability to be able to get real-time feedback so that they could pivot their own proposals. They also liked the interaction that you got and the way that we could work on a relationship rather than just on a written document. Sometimes system leadership is about trying something new and seeing how it goes, and this is what we've did with the lap process. We know it's not going to work on every procurement, but we do have a good framework for when it is going to be able to be used, and we'll also share with other government agencies when they might look to use it themselves. So this is one idea where leadership is about trying something new, learning as you go, knowing that you won't always get it 100% right, but also focusing on the end goal and making sure that you bring suppliers along for the journey. Another area I briefly want to touch on is our supplier relationship management program, where, as I'm sure many of you do, you we have tiered our suppliers and based on their criticality to government. Importantly, when we had decentralized procurement and no coordination at a central government level, each agency would be dealing with a supplier individually, and there was little visibility or transparency as to how critical suppliers were to New Zealand, and if there was a major event such as COVID, which agency was the supplier's priority. By establishing a national list of priority suppliers, we're able to work together during what I call peacetime, establish relationships um, that when it comes time to something like COVID or a natural emergency, allows us to rely on the established relationships, clear lines of communication, and suppliers can look to one agency or one organisation to understand where the government priorities are, not have to ring around 20 or 30 different government agency customers and then figure out where the priorities are. A real good example of this was in February this year when we had a cyclone in New Zealand, and there was a significant emergency response required. One Sunday afternoon, some of our key suppliers received phone calls from us. They dropped what they were doing and managed to source additional stock that could be shipped to the cyclone impacted area within 24 hours. Excuse me. Um, at no time were there questions asked about where the money was going to come from, whether this was something that they would be paid for. They knew that because of the established relationship, we would sort out payment post shipment and within 24 hours we had over 10,000 different product items on a vessel heading to the cyclone impacted area from 5 different suppliers. The invoicing and payment was tidied up in the days that followed, but the suppliers knew that they could trust and work with us because of that established relationship, and they wouldn't be left out of pocket. Another area I am keen to just share with you is talk about transparency, and that's a key expectation of the public sector in New Zealand. This transparency is expected from taxpayers, from other suppliers, from members of parliament, our friends in the media, and anyone else who wants to be able to see that money is being spent in the right way. To support increased transparency, we've recently developed dashboards that show publicly how agencies are performing. These dashboards show metrics like time RFPs are in the market, time to contract award, a number of direct contracts that didn't go through an open procurement process. We're also working on dashboards that itemize spend with individual suppliers, spend under different contracts, so that anyone will be able to go and manipulate the data and understand which suppliers are supplying which government agencies. Yes, there might be one or two things that people discover that may not paint the government in a great light, but we would rather be transparent and use these dashboards to actually show progress and improvement than not be open and honest. Ultimately, these dashboards will allow the public greater transparency as to what agencies are doing and where they're spending their money. It'll also allow agencies to compare their own performance against similar agencies and understand where they can potentially improve. And ultimately, we might see some improvement in compliance against some of our procurement requirements. Again, when we think about Procurement 2.0, we know some of our projects will take a year or two to be fully realised. And some of these projects, like these dashboards, are quicker initiatives that help build and maintain credibility that we are actually progressing, that we're actually delivering. And so, again, that's a fundamental part of our Procurement 2.0 program. Is not everything is going to be delivered in the first year, but we will actually have some quick wins, similar to we had with procurement back in 2010. So, where are we going? Where is the way forward? Yes, we have a 2030 vision that we're heading towards and a 2 to 3 year plan to start this transformation, to start this journey. But we know the path will not always be straightforward. I think we've all learned from the past 2.5 years that things definitely don't stay the same. The external environment, government, economic priorities, um, climate, global issues, things will continue to change. We also know there'll be some challenges that we can predict, but there'll be some things that we can't. For instance, we know in New Zealand we've got a general election in 22 days' time where we could see a change in government and we could see a change in priorities. There will also be things that we don't know about, um, and we need to be prepared as we can for those. I want to really acknowledge that things don't always go to plan. We've had a few false starts with some of our e-procurement system, meaning that in many ways we lag behind in this area. We're not where we want to be. Um, we do want to make sure that we learn from what's worked well in the past, but also make sure that we don't make the same mistakes again. To me, it isn't about making mistakes, it's not making mistakes twice. Another Māori whakatauki or proverb is whae te iti kaharangi ki te tuhuko mehe moanga teitei. Roughly, this means seek the treasure you value most dearly. If you bow your head, let it be to a lofty mountain. To me, this proverb is about aiming high or for what is truly valuable. But when you break it down, its real message is to know what you want, to be persistent, be determined, and don't let obstacles stop you from reaching your goal. Know where you are going, know where your North Star is, and make sure you do everything to move in that general direction. Our strategy, our work program, our tactics, even ourselves, we need to be agile, we need to adjust our course. Our future state needs to be policy and politically agnostic. We know investment and policy priorities will change over the coming years, but we need to create an efficient, resilient, and effective procurement system that is capable of readily flexing and potentially pivoting to changing needs without needing a complete overhaul. Yes, we can keep our vision in sight, and for us, it's a fair, transparent, and inclusive, efficient procurement system that delivers high public value to all New Zealanders. But we will need to keep scanning and adjusting our approach. As I said at the start of this presentation, he waka eke noa, we're all in this together. We need to know where we're going so we can paddle in the same direction, so we can truly deliver for the benefit of our respective organisations, our suppliers, our people, and our planet. I will now take any questions. There's a question one in the chat that has been just messaged to me. What's the difference between strategic and tactical procurement? So that's a really good question. To me, strategic procurement is more than just a buying of something. It is the combination of knowing your market before you go out to buy it, but also working with your suppliers. As I mentioned, our supplier relationship management program, um, knowing what your critical suppliers are and making sure that they have an understanding of the criticality to you of their business. Um, if you're just buying a pen or a bottle of water, that's probably more in the transactional nature because a pen might not be critical to your business, but your certain software or similar might be. So invest the time and effort in that strategic procurement, not in those temporary relationships where a tactical purchase might be okay. Are there other questions from anyone? Got a question about contingency planning due to criticality and how is it planned? That's a really good question. Um, so I'll use an example of what happened during COVID. Um, so as I mentioned, New Zealand's at the bottom of the world in many instances, and at the end of some supply chains. And at the start of COVID, we had limited access to laptops and desktops that were needed within New Zealand government agencies. Because we had already established with our supply chains who priority agencies were, we were able to actually work with those suppliers to um, distribute laptops to where those needs were, rather than those suppliers having to figure out the needs for themselves. Um, so it's about planning during peacetime. I think I mentioned what I call peacetime earlier, when things are going well, invest the time in those relationships and get to know your suppliers so that when you do need to call them in an emergency, you've got an agreed way of operating so you don't have to worry about invoicing all that sort of stuff when things are critical.
Thank you for the insightful presentation, Mr. Perkins. Thanks for that. And now we will move on to the next session. And thanks for answering the questions as well.
Thank
So
you.
now we're going to move on to the next session. Thank you. Okay, there are more questions coming in. Would you be able to take one last question? Do we have any robust methodology for an ecosystem of generative AI that you could build to enhance efficiency and productivity in the digital technology and procurement space? Thank you.
Gee, that's a really good question to finish on, isn't it? AI is not something that I've spent or have a lot of knowledge on, so I'm not going to claim to have a decent answer for that. Um, yeah, again, it would be something that I would want to understand or talk to suppliers about, um, and have really open discussions with suppliers about what's potentially possible now. But also, if you're going into something like AI or any technology, make sure any contract or piece of work is flexible to allow for what will undoubtedly change over time. Um, that's probably as far as I will go in an AI environment, something that I'm not that familiar with. Sorry.
Thank you. There is another question here. Would you like to take it? This is the last one, I think. Today, procurement is based on IoT, artificial intelligence. How will you cost on purchase order? This is again.
Yeah, again,
Yeah.
I'll leave that to the AI experts if that's all right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks.
Mr. Perkins. Thanks.